I loved fairy tales. I loved fairy tales. I liked to imagine that I was in a different world, and that made it very exciting when I went to a bookshop a couple of years ago in my hometown, and I found this book. It's called Legends and Tales of the Harz Mountains, which is in Germany. That mountain range is in Germany, northern Germany. And I have traveled to Germany, but I haven't gone to the north, so it's still on my bucket list. But I have a previous video where I read the preface of this book, and it was actually very interesting because the author, or the person who compiled the fairy tales, her name was Tufi Lauder, I think, and she described a lot of the areas where these tales and legends were concocted. So some of the topography of the area, and she just described it, and it just sounds so beautiful. So I definitely want to go there sometime. But tonight we are going to read, or today, whenever you're watching, we're going to read the first story out of this book, which is the legend of Brunhilde, and Brunhilde is a princess, and she has to face this giant. So I'm going to read that story to you, and I hope you like it because I find it inspiring. Maybe that's corny. I don't know. Okay. So this is the legend of the Rosstrappe. And the Rosstrappe, so Ross is a steed, like a horse. So Ross is a horse. Trap is a footprint. So legend of the horse's footprint. Ages ago, there ruled a king in Bohemia, whose castle stood on a lofty mountain where the thunder and the eagle found a home. This king had a daughter, the golden-haired Brunhilde, the fame of whose marvelous beauty was spread far and wide. Mighty rulers and the sons of kings sought the hand of the lovely royal maiden, and among the numerous wooers came the son of the king of the Harz, who won her heart. And after the lovers had sworn everlasting fidelity, the Harz prince returned to his father to announce his betrothal and make arrangements for the nuptials. After his departure, there arrived a new suitor for Brunhilde's hand, whom her father feared to reject. This was one of those terrible giants who inhabited North Europe. They were invincible, and wherever they appeared, all yielded with terror to their might. This dreadful lover brought the princess costly gifts of gold, amber, and precious stones. The father, after 3 days' time for consideration, promises the giant his daughter. Brunhilde throws herself horrified on her knees before her father, weeping and tearing her hair. But the king, though moved with pity, assures her the giant has power to destroy him and his kingdom. From this hour, Brunhilde appears composed. She neither wept nor complained, but met her destined bridegroom with a solemn dignity. Of a truly kingly character, she contained her agony to silence, but hoped ever for deliverance through the return of her Harz lover. Still, he came not. Now the giant had 2 steeds, giant steeds, one white as the snows of the Northland, his eyes shining like stars, the other, the giant's body horse, black as the night, with eyes like the lightning, at whose running his hooves resounded like thunder, and the earth trembled and shook. Both these steeds seemed in the chase to overtake the storm and kept time with the lightning. Brunhilde saw these giant steeds, and the thought of flight occurred to her. Was success possible? She had never mounted the snowy steed. Great was the giant's joy when Brunhilde begged to ride with him. She mounted daily the terrible animal and soon could ride a race with the giant on the mountains. At last, the evening before the nuptials arrived, and Brunhilde, having arrayed herself in white robes, a golden crown, and a long white veil floating behind her, and the amber and the diamonds, the giant's gifts, welcomed the numerous guests who thronged the royal palace and looked lovingly upon the giant bridegroom, who was overwhelmed with an unheard of bliss at the lovely vision. At length the princess rose and retired. The giant remained to drink of the costly wines. Suddenly he heard the snorting and stamping of his war steeds. He sprang up and looked down into the courtyard. There sat Brunhilde in her glittering robes, the golden crown still upon her head, her white veil and golden hair fluttering in the wind, and her fearless courage and queenly beauty upon the snowy steed before the open gates. At sight of him, she let loose her reins, and the mighty steed shot forth, swift as the storm wind, like a streak of light, into the darkness of the night. The giant uttered a cry of fury that shook the castle to its foundations, seized his battle axe, and mounted his war horse, crying, "If she flee to the dragon of the old German water hill in the valley of serpents, I will bring her hence." And now begins the fearful race. Through meadow and forest, over mountain and ravine, flee the pursuer and pursued. The white steed, always in advance, fleeing swift as a meteor through the heavens, behind the black steed, like a spirit from the eternal darkness. All through the night lasted the terrible ride. The earth groaned and thundered, the forest trembled, the birds and beasts fled in terror. Long streaks of fire swept through the grim darkness, and the snorting of the steeds was like the roar of the north wind. At last, dawn reflects her rosy blush over the mountain and wood. Brunhilde utters a cry of joy and triumph. There before her lies the Harz, her lover's mountain home and future kingdom. That distant peak is the Brocken. She spurs on her noble steed till she reaches the Hexentatzenplatz, which is dancing floor, when suddenly the horse stops, rears, plunges, and refuses to advance. Before her yawns the terrible rocky abyss of the Bode Valley. Behind, she hears the deadly foe advancing, uttering the most dreadful curses. What shall she do? Forward over the wild abyss? Backward is to fall into the arms of the enemy. The choice is not difficult. She turns the horse's head to the fearful chasm and spurs him on. Like an eagle, the noble animal leaps the yawning abyss, lands safely on the other side, and impressing its giant hoofprint into the granite, sinks exhausted. But the princess loses her golden crown in the gulf beneath the Bode Castle. The giant, in rage and fury, spurs on his dusky steed to leap after her, but falls and is broken on the rocks. And ever since, transformed into a hellhound, he guards the golden crown in the Bode Castle. The princess saved dances for joy, and her footprints are still to be seen in the solid granite. The mountain has ever since been called the Rosstrappe, and the giant Bodo gave his name to the valley and the river.